My name is John. I work for a channel called Civic Spectrum, and this video was given to me by my partner in the channel. He thought I'd find it interesting, so we're going to react to it together and see what's going on. This is a video with a journalist, Ukrainian journalist, talking about how Zelensky is not all he is cracked up to be. Let's see if this is Russian propaganda or legitimate.
Okay, we have Diana Penchenko on, who is a Ukrainian journalist. And in fact, she used to be Journalist of the Year in Ukraine before she had some difficulties here. But first of all, Diana, welcome to the show.
Hello, Colonel Davis. It's a big honor for me. Thank you for invitation. Nice to meet you.
Well, it's good to have you here. And just so all of our audience knows, we're going to be using a translator with Maxim Sidorov to be doing the translation from here on out. So, I wonder if for our audience, you could explain a little bit, first of all, about who you are, because apparently you have been banished from Ukraine.
Полковник Дэвис, спасибо за такой вопрос.
Colonel Davis,
Я
thank you
была...
very much for this question. I used to be one of the most popular journalists in Ukraine, and I remain in this capacity. My audience in Ukraine, in all of the CS countries, I'm so grateful to God that I am able to reach out to so many people who are all over the world, literally. So, like you, I was living in my country, and in my time, I could never think about leaving it, but the circumstances unfolded in such a way.
All right, we got some red flags. Apparently, at one point, she was the most celebrated journalist in Ukraine, and now apparently she's not even allowed in the country. I wonder why that is. So let's see if we can figure it out for ourselves. Oh, geez. If you look at my tabs, I might have already done a little bit of searching on this lady. So maybe I'm ahead of the power curve. So let's just do a fresh Google search of her and see if she is all she is cracked up to be. Da-da-da-da-da. Oh, I already did it. Let's see. Take a look. Okay. TV host and journalist of the year in Ukraine. Used to be among your top 10 influential women. That's according to X, the Nazi website. Okay. Ukraine's journalist of the year in 2020. Seventh most influential woman in Ukraine. Got it. She's talking about corruption. Kremlin sponsored since 2018. Okay. All right, that's already starting to tell a picture about how this woman is maybe a Russian plant, or maybe Russians got to her. This below. Kiev. Ooh, Ukrainian trader fled Kiev. UAcrisis.org. Let's take a look at this site, see if it's worth looking at. Russian propaganda monitoring. Diana Penchenko. Penchenko. The trader goes to English. Opting safe haven, aggressive state Russian, since she has spent most of her time pro-Russian disinformation, conspiracy theories, in the name of common sense alternative thinking. Penchenko has since created her own YouTube channel, attracting a healthy amount of Kremlin investment. Big surprise there. And even gaining access to Lukashenko. Interview with Lukashenko. Interesting. So it's already starting to not look good for her. I had to kind of look around a little bit for that. But to be honest with you, like the smell test of this kind of gave me like the ick vibes when she starts like kind of bad mouthing her own country. So let's see if it continues in the video, or maybe she'll start speaking some common sense.
So
maybe
that
she
the
stopped
closer Ukraine
taking money
came
from the Russians.
to the point beyond which the war broke out, the more forceful wars, the authorities who had tried to libel the people like me. I'm sure that you were confronted by this kind of oppressing in your situation, but regrettably, it reached such a level in Ukraine that people who simply stood out for peace, for good neighborly relations with the neighboring countries, all these people who are simply not able to stay in Ukraine. And I had to.
Do you know why peace and good neighborly relations can't happen between Ukraine and Russia? Because Russians have systematically put a lot of their citizens in different regions of Russia and Ukraine, and then tried to claim that those places were more Russian than Ukrainian, and then annex them. So that's something that's happened, and I can imagine if I am president of Ukraine, or a citizen of Ukraine, I'm going to be very weary about people who are trying to have me make nice with my friends, my neighbors, excuse me, and try to make friends with them if every bit of action by those neighbors and friends has been hostile towards me. And the reality of the situation is Ukraine had no point invaded Russia. Russia 100% has invaded Ukraine. So, yeah, that's kind of the facts of the matter.
Leave my country after multiple threats to my life, which is an extremely sad page in my life book. So I had to go. Many of my colleagues who still remain in Ukraine, they remain there, but they are under the police custody and in prisons. So why did I have to leave Ukraine? What is it that I did so terrible thing? Was I acting as a Kremlin puppet? Not at all. I was simply telling the truth, like things that you are talking in your programs, Colonel Davis. I was saying that Ukraine needs peace. Ukraine doesn't need to pick up any bones with any neighbors, particularly Russia, that it needs to maintain good relations with all neighbors around. And for that,
Whose responsibility is peace at this point? This reminds me a lot of what Trump did to Zelensky in the White House, where we are blaming the victim constantly. They're a country that got invaded by a much larger and more aggressive country. That larger and more aggressive country was expected to sweep the entire war like instantly, like they were expected to steamroll Ukraine. And the best laid plans of mice and men, obviously that didn't work. And now that it's gotten messy, Russia doesn't know how to get out of this cleanly. That's a huge problem for Ukraine because they don't have the material or manpower to keep this up, even though they're doing an excellent job fighting the Russians. At the end of the day, Russia's still got a significantly larger economy than Ukraine. They've got significantly more material and manpower, especially with the United States not backing them up like the way we used to. So it's valiant what the Ukrainians have done. I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. I was in Iraq twice, and to be honest with you, thinking about those countrymen fighting for their state, their nation, and fighting for something that's truly important, rather than kind of the war I suffered through, which didn't feel like there was much meaning behind it. It's tragic to see a country that didn't pick a fight get steamrolled, and then stuff like this come out that, to me, so far on its surface, definitely feels like Russian propaganda. Anyway, let's keep watching. Maybe she'll clean it up.
I was proclaimed an enemy of the people. Zelensky opened the personal issued or opened the criminal case against me. I'm continuously under various threats to my life, which I'm receiving. But no matter how strange it may sound, it is very important to be able to tell the truth about what's going on in Ukraine, and that's what I'm doing. So thank you so much for having me, for giving me an opportunity to share more about Ukraine with the people who are following you.
Well, listen, we are very, very grateful to have you on. And as someone who has also had an issue where I've told the truth that was unpopular in the past, I have the highest of admiration for you, because I never took hardly any of the heat that you're taking. I never had in my life threatened. So
this idea of the noble truth sayer, I'm the paragon of truth, and when I finally spoke that truth, people just couldn't handle it, and I became public enemy number one. I mean, that stuff does happen for sure. There's plenty of opportunities for people to just like kind of whistleblow and tell something that is legitimate and true. But your country's at war right now, and you were found to be coordinating.
Respect and honor to you for continuing to tell the truth. It's an inspiration to a lot of people.
Thank you so much for such kind words.
Because there's such a gap between the translator
States,
and her talking, I'm going to bump this up to 1.5 speed.
And what kind
just
of
to help
that
me out.
very freedom that we
Where's the
hear
speed?
from the mainstream media in the United
I'd
States.
never go
Again,
one,
the reason that I was
even 1.25. I'd never
proclaimed
go
to be
overspeed
the enemy of the people,
to
because
test
people who
anything.
receive the paycheck from Zelensky, they're trying to convince that I am doing something wrong. And I wrote in my Telegram channel that Ukraine needs to have peace in order to stay, in order to survive. And exactly because of that, 2 criminal cases were opened against me and personal sanctions were imposed. You cannot even mention the whole.
Let's see. I don't know this yet, so we'll find this out together. Control V. Reason for charges in Ukraine. According to SBU, since October 22, has been working with Russian propaganda, systematically justify Russian aggression on her YouTube channel, supporting the occupation of Ukraine and its territories. Fantastic. Manipulating information. Yeah, so this is Russian propaganda. It takes like a 5-second Google search. So, yeah, cool. Let's take a look at her Wikipedia. Pro-Russian TV station News One. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think we're pretty
absurdity,
deep in the
terrible thing
propaganda.
that is
But
currently taking place in Ukraine. But now,
see
with
what
me
she has to
having
say.
this big
See
platform
what the
and
Kremlin's
big
trying to tell us
number
about
of followers
Ukraine.
where I can
What they think
talk
Ukraine's going on.
about the true things.
Tell
Speaking
us,
about
comrade.
people
Let's
who
go.
stay in Ukraine, I'm not afraid to say that they are hostage to the government there. Men are hiding at home. They're not.
Do you think they're hostage to the Ukrainian government, or do you think they're hostage to the occupation by another aggressive nation?
Walking out, they're being supported by their wives and their mothers because they're afraid to go out, because they're afraid that any instant they could be caught by the conscription service and taken to the front. Some of the people are trying to cross the borders and they are caught, and it sounds horrible, but they're being shot in the back of their head. And that is the terrible thing that we, the Ukrainians, have to live through.
Yeah, I did a little research to see how many executions. I would love if there's somebody can correct me in the comments, please. By all means, correct me in the comments. Yeah, I looked into this and I couldn't find any evidence of any summary executions by Ukraine against people trying to trying to flee, evade conscription. So I don't know where she got that from. If there's proof of that, please, I would love to see it. Furthermore, the idea that you're simping and crying for people who are fleeing the opportunity to fight for their sovereignty, I don't know. Maybe it's just an American thing, but like I wholeheartedly disagree with that. And I think that if you are trying to avoid fighting for your country and you just want to sit in the sidelines and pretend like it's not your problem, and there's martial law, which there is right now in Ukraine, and it's part of their law. Like, I don't like Trump, but if the draft started today and they drafted me, I would shrug my shoulders and say I don't like this, but I would fucking do it because it's my job as an American, whether I agree with the leader or not. So the reality that we're crying over people who are trying to evade conscription to fight for their country, as far as my perspective, that's utter horseshit. Those people are cowards and they deserve to be prosecuted by the law. And from what I know, from what I've looked up, the majority of punishments are like 3 to 5 years in jail, or 10 to 15 if you're evading conscription just because it's more treasonous. So yeah, it's not good. I mean, I'd sure plenty of people probably prefer avoiding war, but you know, we have a lot of Americans who fought war that didn't want to, that went and did their duty and they came home. And it's not fair, but it's just the life that you're stuck living because of Russia, not because of Ukraine.
Every day, something that the mainstream media doesn't want to notice at all.
And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what do the Ukrainian people in Ukraine think about you now. Do you have many supporters who want to hear the truth and are glad to listen to you now?
I want to say that the situation in Ukraine is becoming worse and worse with every day. That the military conscription, forceful conscription,
This came out
is
9 days
becoming
ago, by the
tougher
way.
and uglier with every day. Ukraine
When
today
was the
reminds me
not long
of
after the drone
some
strikes?
horror
I don't know.
movie.
Sounds like
A
Russia's got their
country
feelings
behind
hurt a
the
little bit.
mirrors. On the one hand, we see very expensive vehicles. As soon
Oh, I
as
love
new
this meme.
models being produced, like
The
Rolls-Royce,
president of the
selling
country is
600,000 or
flossing on his
700,000 US dollars
war-torn
worth, immediately the next day you see them
citizens. It's
driving,
always good.
being driven through the
Like
Ukrainian road.
the meme that his wife bought jewels at Saks Fifth Avenue or something when they were in America. It's just Russian propaganda. It's just nonstop.
Roads, and we see the images where Ukrainian officials, Zelensky's friends, they don, you know, the suits worth tens of thousands of US dollars, but that is just 100% of people like that who can afford things like that in Ukraine. Political technologists and the journalists who are being paid for, telling everybody that everything is all right. But
we're talking about Ukrainian people's wares and what they do with the money during this time of crisis, and I have some serious skepticism towards her claims. Whilst a pro-Russian, a Ukrainian who's a pro-Russian oligarch is currently the one paying for all of this, these news reports and her hiatus from Ukraine. So she's being well taken care of by the Russian state. So I wonder why that is.
are also ordinary people in the street, and I can tell you the way they live, and they are struggling, having to live on some minimum amount of pay, which is good enough just to pay for communal services. The cost of living is growing. Mothers who can do it, they're trying to take their sons while they're still 14, 15, 16 years old out of the country because they understand that their sons will die at the front. But ordinary males who
conscription age is 25. So unless you think this war's going to last 10 more years, that's horseshit.
Are more than 22 years old, they're simply afraid to step out of their homes. People are literally sitting at home because they're aware that once you step out at any point in time, the conscription service can catch you. If you don't want to go to the front, then terrible things may happen.
Once again, 22-year-olds don't have to worry about that. 25-year-olds do. And it used to be 27. They dropped to 25.
Happen to you. There have been so
American draft age is 18, by the way.
many cases of people who were beaten up by the conscription officers when they refused to be taken to the front. Very often women are trying to save their men.
Resisting the government authorities who are trying to enforce laws that you agreed to follow by being a citizen in that country, and them trying to run away from their duty is not them getting beat up by the administration. I'm sorry, this is not what's happening.
And so you can see the footage when women are standing in front.
Of course, as I pause it, the guy punches him in the chest. So yeah, maybe that's a bit much, but I mean, the reality is these people are just trying to avoid serving their country in time of war. So although I don't love him that guy getting socked in the chest, I don't have super large amount of sympathy for people who are just trying to avoid their duty. It's just not something I get. It's not something I have any tolerance for. I'm sorry.
Conscription officers trying to protect their men, and there are brave enough women, thank God, who are still capable of resisting. And in this whole horror, the main question is, why in Ukraine children have to be born if they cannot walk simply along the streets, breathe freely, because it all looks like some absurd story. So it's very difficult to talk about nothing other than peace that the country needs. So I call upon you.
She has said remarkably little during this interview so far about why this all started and who is actually at fault for this, Russia. So that's another huge red flag. Like, obviously, everything she said is, like, super fucking obviously Russian propaganda. But the reality of it is the fact that she's not, like, holding any culpability to the invading nation. I mean, this really does remind me of the whole thing that Trump did to Zelensky, which makes me think Trump's conversations with Vladimir Putin have been, like, super one way, where Trump is just like, yeah, you're right, you're so good, and then Vladimir Putin is just like, yes, this guy's a fucking idiot, I can just tell him whatever the fuck I want. And then, like, he parrots it on our television and he just embarrasses the fuck out of us all. So yeah, it's all Russian nonsense.
Your audience not to believe the false information and the lies that one may hear from the Ukrainian media, that the Ukrainians don't want any compromise, the Ukrainians want to fight. No, most of the Ukrainians want peace. They all are willing for this terrible situation to come to an end.
Yeah, I'm sure the woman who's not in the country because she's labeled as a traitor understands that the majority of Ukrainians don't want to fight Russia. I'm sure the woman who's getting Russian money from Russian oligarchs isn't trying to spin a weave of falsities.
And in fact, on your X account, you posted this video of a Ukrainian woman that was making some of these very same concerns.
Ховаються від ТЦК, що я можу сказати. Але це люди, які взагалі не хотіли виїжджати. До них приїжджали білі ангели, до них приїжджала я з офіцером громади, приїжджала поліція. Вони не хочуть виїжджати. Причина одна. Буду говорити зараз на всю Україну. Не хочуть іти захищати нашу країну.
So how...
Dude, how can you read that last sentence? They do not want to defend our country. Like if an American told me that and I was in the same situation as Ukraine, like it'd be very difficult for me to not lash out. I think Western people have become so fucking soft and they are just so not worried about like legitimate like threats from other countries, especially fucking the United States of America, because we're fucking big dick players. But the reality is these people are fighting for their home. They're fighting for their sovereignty. We had to do that once before, but it's been so long that all of our Starbucks-addled fucking douchebag fucking Americans who fucking wear dumb red hats and vote for dipshits fucking don't seem to understand that, like, this is more than just like, oh, we're beefing, so we're going to fucking kill each other. This isn't fucking Israel and Palestine, even though that's way different than this too. But, like, that's a little bit more seated in freaking, like, vitriol and hate. This is just like this was Russia trying to use their military to annex more land for themselves. The United States at first did a very good job of supplying them with what they needed. They put weird restrictions on them, which I don't think they should have. And now that Trump's in office, we're just not going to help them anymore, and it's up to the Europeans to help them. And I hope to God they do. I hope to God the Ukraine wins this war. I hope this woman winds up in jail. I hope this guy I hope I have to talk to him one day so I can tell him that he's a piece of crap, because 5 minutes of searching led me to understand that this woman is blatantly a Russian plant. And this guy's an American veteran, and he's pretending like he's the truth sayer, and he's the guy who's going to let us all know what's going on. But he's like he's like super dishonest to the Americans who are watching this video. The comment section is full of people saying, well, this woman's a hero, blah, 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 because they're just dumb people who don't know any better, because this fucking asshole fed them a line of garbage by putting this video up.
How widespread are views like this in Ukraine? Is there a combination of some who are patriotic and they want to follow Zelensky and others like this? How would you describe the balance?
Yes, I can tell you who's ready to support Zelensky today. These are the people whom he's paying. These are his pocket reporters in the military. There is one Sergei Sternenko. He is the person who was convicted 3 times, one of which was homicide, and he is right now in the center.
Still not mentioning the fact that they're currently being occupied, large pieces of their country being occupied by a foreign nation. Still haven't reconciled that. Either of them have.
And he's calling upon Ukrainians to go and join fighting, and he supports Zelensky. And of course, all the rest of the people who are benefiting from the war are supporting Zelensky, who are robbing the country.
Who's benefiting from proof?
Horrible statistics.
Proof?
15 billion
This woman's the best journalist in all fucking Ukraine. Can you give me a little bit of proof? Maybe the journalistic standards in Ukraine are less than in America, but there's fucking, like, she's just talking shit.
Currently, officially, it is forbidden for men to leave the country, but some of the people can afford to pay.
It's forbidden for men to leave the country because of martial law.
So 15 billion is the amount of money that people paid in order to break out of the country. So those who can rob others, those who are being funded by Zelensky, who support him, can enjoy a good life. Not a single sociological survey will be representing the true story, because the current true rating of Zelensky's support is difficult to measure, because people are afraid to give an honest answer whenever they're being asked, because people today are being put into the prison, into the police custody, simply for putting a like to somebody's account in a social network.
I need proof of that.
So
Let's see if we can find that. Jailed for likes. Ukrainians jailed for likes. Ukraine. jailed. Ah. 4 likes. I type like a retard, dude, guys. Sorry. Ah. God, I'm bad at typing. Ukrainian court was a prison sentence for reposting or even liking social media posts that support Russia. Human rights, the information portal on human rights. Recent 5-year sentence against prison liking text justifying Russia's war against Ukraine. Social network. Back on September 23, some commentators expressed deep unease. Wow, this one might be true. Full-scale invasion. Yeah. Well, that's not good. I can't say I agree with that, but at the same time, I can defend it a little bit. Part of what's been going on with Russia and Ukraine is the reality that they have infiltrated that country with a lot of their citizenry, and that citizenry has tried to subvert all attempts for Ukraine to exercise its sovereignty. So I guess their thought process is like they're nipping in the butt all of that the internal problems. But I don't agree with that. I don't think you should be in jail for like. But I mean, if you're talking about what America's done, I mean, during the communist hunts, we did a lot worse than that. So I don't know. 2 wrongs don't make a right, but I can kind of justify why they would do something like that, even though I don't agree with it.
Just hope that some sort of a social polling will be an honest one. It's futile. And today in Ukraine, it is a dictatorship because not a single politician can openly say, for example, that he would like to run for a president or is against Zelensky, because whoever says it would immediately be put into behind bars. And there are quite a few people like that. For example, like a politician and a member of the Zelensky's party previously, who is behind bars, and he was not allowed to have an attorney to join him there. So it is very important to understand that whatever we hear today about Ukraine from official media, this is not just untrue. This is a very daring, audacious lying.
She didn't give a name.
Let me ask you a question. But
She didn't give
one
a
of the
name
things we
who?
hear all the time in Western media, and I'm talking about from Zelensky himself, from Keir
this
Starmer,
Trump voter, I
Ursula
swear to
von der
God.
Leyen, etc.
Probably
They
made this
always
video
say that
because Trump shit
Ukraine
on
is
Zelensky. He's like,
defending the
yeah,
values
fucking
of
Trump
Europe,
did it.
that they're standing
This
for
guy's a fucking
democracy
loser.
and for freedom. And you say you don't think that's the case at home. Why do you say that?
You know, Colonel Davis, here I can share with you a list that was put together by myself and my team, which is the list of political prisoners in Ukraine. And this is the people whose personal data we were able to double check and verify. They're all in prison. These are priests, these are journalists, politicians, and activists. And this is just a tiny share of the people who have suffered for saying the truth.
I like the
don't know
prop.
even the exact
I
figures
like how
because
she printed
many
off a
are simply
list
put
as a
down
prop
into the
just to
dungeons
show
and
us
the
pieces of
basement
paper,
sort of,
and she's
prisons.
not going to use that.
And
She's
it
not going
is
to say
all
a single
taking place
name.
in a very illegal, horrible way. And
Maybe
that
I'm
is
wrong.
exactly why I
Am I
am
wrong?
claiming that this is some kind of a parallel reality whenever these people talk about
That's that
the
Epstein list shit
protection
that
of defense of
fucking
freedom. Of course,
stupid
back
ass
in
Pam
February
Bondi did.
2022, Ukrainians, they all put their act together against the aggression, and they
look at
felt
this.
that they were capable
Nothing
of
in it.
changing the situation and defending themselves. But soon it became apparent that the war would be endless and it would only be worse. For example, how many times you saw or heard that some towns or cities that Zelensky said would never be left and given to Russia were simply abandoned. So what people want right now is peace. But regrettably, the current situation in Ukraine is such.
Did he abandon the territory, or did he have to cede it to Russia because Ukrainians are a much smaller country that can't manage to beat back all of Russia at once? Like, that's just such a stupid fucking goddamn like knock on your leadership. Just let him have it. Like, what the fuck is he supposed to do? You've got people by your own admission who are trying to not fight for the country in the war, and you're showing videos of these people getting rounded up. Obviously, he doesn't have enough people to hold the entire country because Russia's invading the people who are paying you.
That they are extremely disappointed. Of course, they're disappointed over Russia, who went into Ukraine. They're disappointed over the Western aid because they simply don't know what to believe. In Ukraine, the authorities forbidden the church, the Russian Orthodox Church, because it had most of the people were the believers in that. So people are afraid to even say a word in Russian out loud because for speaking Russian out in the street, they could be in prison. So the situation is terrible, really.
And I want to go to one of the sound bites here from Volodymyr Zelensky himself, because you talk about reaching for peace. He keeps saying he wants to end the war, he wants to reach for peace. But in this clip from, I believe it was yesterday, it was when he made this statement, he's basically saying that everybody else is to blame here.
Ми втрачаємо життя наших людей. Всюди. На Херсонщині, Харківщині, Донеччині, Сумщині. Через російські обстріли, через цю війну, яка давно вже могла б закінчитись, якби світ реагував на Росію принципово та не купувався б на російські маніпуляції та брехню. Сьогодні я провів нараду з нашими військовими, з нашими урядовцями щодо наслідків удару по енергетиці України і необхідних кроків для гарантування нашої стійкості. Визначили конкретні завдання міністру енергетики, Міністерству оборони, військовим та Службі безпеки України.
So he says on the one hand, he accurately talks about all the damage that's happening to Ukraine with all these attacks in cities all over the country with missile strikes, obviously all along the line of contact. But then he says that the problem is that the Western world didn't come to his aid before. So first of all, when he makes these kinds of statements, how is that...
In your feelings a bit much, Dan? That's kind of not what he said. And, you know, the United States has, for all intent and purposes, abandoned Ukraine, in making friends with Russia, because him and Putin are best friends. And the reality is, if we had given him with no, like, you can't use these, if we'd given him everything we would be able to give him, like F-16s and, you know, tactical missiles, and give them the green light to use all of that, there might be a better scenario here where Russia would have quit sooner, and this would have been a better scenario. Not for you and your Russian propagandists, but for, like, Ukraine and the people who fucking matter. You guys would be shit out of luck because your team, the Russians, didn't win, but the Ukrainians might have won if we had let them do their job, what they wanted to do. That's probably what he's in reference to. And furthermore, we had him in the White House getting fucking embarrassed by Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and reporters about the clothes he was wearing while his country is being under siege, and propagandists like this are trying to subvert his fucking leadership from the middle of war. It's absurd. And you are a ridiculous person, Dan. I fucking can't stand you so far.
Received in Ukraine when they see the shelling and going on, but they see that it's not stopping.
I would say that is very much cynical on his part towards Ukrainians, because it's very difficult for me to express what people really feel, what we feel deep in our hearts, because it's the most terrible thing when you cannot hope on anything or anyone. People don't trust the authorities because the authorities didn't defend them. The government turned out to be worse than any occupier. People don't trust Russia. People don't trust...
The Ukrainian government's worse than any occupier? Wow, that's a pretty strong statement for a Ukrainian to say. It's almost as if you're not actually Ukrainian, or if you are, you're definitely not pro-Russian.
America, because in Ukraine, all through these years, a very planned policy was being pursued where people were being persuaded that America is going to defend them for eternity. It's going to be like their shield. Now, everything is, today is easy to understand that the European politicians keep on saying that the war must not be stopped. Now, did they ask us whether we want to be this shield for the Europe? And of course, the roots of this terrible situation go very deep. It all began...
Man, if you're not a Russian propagandist, you're just a fucking asshole who just wants to quit and let your country get invaded. I know you're a Russian propagandist, so this doesn't count, but if you, by some fucking chance, were just a giant fucking pussy, you would deserve to get invaded over and over and over again. Oh, peace at all costs. We don't need to fight for our sovereignty. Oh, it doesn't fucking matter to us. Yeah, you would deserve to get invaded at that point. Yeah, for sure. You're so, but I mean, that's not what's happening. You're not just a pussy Ukrainian. You're a fucking Russian plan. So, I mean, what you're saying is fucking very Tim Poolish.
Yeah, not in 2022, and even not in 2014.
America should
I mean to say that
apologize to
Ukrainians
Russia.
started being prepared for
Fucking
war
Tim Pool,
much,
the
much
worst people
earlier.
on the internet.
I am the contemporary of the current Ukraine. I attended Ukrainian school. I love Ukrainian language very much. And since our childhood, we've been told that our biggest enemy is Russia, that our ancestors for centuries had to die fighting Russia. Only today I understand that somebody was trying to prepare us for something horrible. When I was a child, definitely I couldn't comprehend that. And without doubt, today's Ukraine, uh, it's the biggest country in Europe, which used to be the loveliest country in Europe, and it became the testing ground where people living in such a nice country, Ukraine could have been a very prosperous, very wealthy country, considering its geographical location in between Russia and Europe, the kind of country which you could maintain friendly relations with everyone. It turned now into a pauper, really, and the figure of poverty is much higher.
Excuse me, could have maintained friendly relationships with everybody? Could they have maintained a friendly relationship with Russia when they're flooding the eastern part of the country with Russian citizens, to then claim that that place is more Russian than Ukrainian, so it must be ours, and then start a war and invasion to try and rebuild the Soviet Union? You commie Russian hack.
More than 20 million people left Ukraine post-2022. The mortality rate is growing catastrophically, and the most painful thing that one must acknowledge, that people don't see their future in Ukraine. So everyone who can take families out, they do it. Children is the most important thing that we need to defend, because they need to stay in Ukraine and see their future. But what kind of future you could see when it's hard to understand when the war is going to come to an end? There is no single hope. There's no light in the end of the tunnel.
And is there any concern among the Ukrainian people that Zelensky is trying to negotiate an end to the war right now? He doesn't want to give away the territory, but he would freeze it on the current line of contact. And yet, the deal that he had in April of 2022 at Istanbul, he would have only had to give up 2 provinces. So by not engaging with diplomacy then, already there's been hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men killed, and now it's more territory that would have to be lost. Does anyone complain, why didn't he make the deal earlier?
Of course, it is very painful to understand that so many people have died, and they could have stayed alive, and all those territories could have stayed in Ukraine. It is very painful to understand it. And at the level of the person in the street, this is very hurting, imagining that it all could have ended back in 2022, because many people were calling the authorities to make peace, myself and many others. I believe that the best thing about the territories and the compromise to ask the Ukrainian military, the ones who are at the front line now, those who are defending the Sumy, the city which the military and the authorities failed to protect.
See the pain in her eyes?
And
Get the
build
fuck out of
defensive
here,
fortifications,
Russian
because
piece of
money was
garbage.
stolen. And so they are throwing the male
Just like
fighters
MAGA Americans,
instead.
just
So
fucking
you should
eat
ask
the
them
slop, dude.
there
Just
at
eat
the
it.
front line
Like, oh,
what they
I'm
want
critical.
more, peace
This must be
or
true.
a return of their territories, because all of it could have worked back in the very beginning, when we were told that we shall never concede Mariupol. But we see what happened to Mariupol and other cities like that. We have been continuously, proclaiming that no, Russia won't take this, won't take that, and the best thing and the most honest thing would be to ask simple Ukrainians. And I can tell you that people like you, Colonel Davis, who really were fighting back in their days, would understand that people should put a stop to these hostilities. It's very painful to understand that people who were, and the men who were
All these
conscripted
Western
back in
takes.
2022, they,
This Russian talking
in many
points
numbers,
too.
died,
People are dying,
and they
so
couldn't
we must
even
stop.
return home
Fighting for their
temporarily for a
fucking
vacation,
sovereignty, that's not
because
important.
Ukraine
Just
was
life is
experiencing
important. So soft. So
manpower
horseshit.
shortage, and so there's no hope.
This is
And
like
I am
Russians
confident
trying to
that the
speak to
Ukrainian
Western
military,
fucking
who are
lib
indeed right
fucking
there at the front
assholes who
line,
are just like,
as
"Oh,
opposed to
the
those
dead."
who are enjoying staying
They
on
don't
their sofas
understand
in
that, like,
Kiev,
fighting for
they
your
would
country is
definitely
the
tell
most
you that
important
the
thing.
biggest
This
thing
is
that
one of the
Ukraine
biggest
wants
things, the
is
best thing you
peace.
could die for. I know
And
everybody
now
agrees
then,
with that.
you know,
Everybody's
Zelensky
fucking
in that
wanting to die for their
commentary I
country,
just
but,
put up there a minute
if you're
ago
gonna die for
is
something,
blaming
it's
the West.
Russia
He said if
war.
they had only stood up
Thank
further
God it would be your country at
earlier,
least,
then
right?
things could have been avoided here. But the fact is that the West gave enormous amounts of support, and it didn't work, especially in 2023 when it had the best chance. It didn't work then. Now then, things are even worse. With this war going on in between Israel and Iran, even more American aid is being diverted from Ukraine into Israel,
We already
and
cut 'em
that
off.
is not lost on the Russian side, as this report here from the BBC shows. Gary, play that headline from the BBC with the headlines of the Russian headlines.
Exactly, that's the case.
Oopsie.
And for sure, the kind of shelling
US
and
has now announced
bombardment that the
military
simple
package to
Ukrainians are
Ukraine in
suffering
almost
from
5
are
months,
becoming harder
including
every day.
Ukrainian
Situation is not getting
warehouses,
better.
Ukraine will be
Maybe
cut
your
and
audience doesn't know
like
that
those
right
highlights.
now in Ukraine, a very strong information campaign was launched to discredit President Trump and the West. It is hard really to believe it, but that is true.
Why would it be
For
hard to
many
believe
years, for
that
decades,
Zelensky
we've
would
been
discredit
told
Trump
that
after
the
Trump
United
embarrassed
States
him in
is
the
the
White House
most powerful
said the most
country in the
absurd
world,
garbage
that
you...
it's enough
I know
for
it's
America
good for you
to
because
twitch
you're
its finger,
Russian,
and
so you
any
think what
country
Trump
will
said
be
was like,
turned
oh
into
yeah, this
ashes,
guy's so
particularly
fucking
Russia.
based.
So
Fucking
whenever
Russia
things broke
didn't
out,
start it.
Ukrainians
Ukraine's the
believe
assholes.
that the
Trump
United
is
States
based.
will have
Russia,
its back
fuck
for
yeah.
eternity because Blinken
Putin
was
and
telling it,
fucking
Biden was
Trump.
telling it.
Yeah.
So you just
For
defend
you,
Europe
that's
and,
great.
we will support you as long
Fucking
as
for
it
people
takes.
like me and Zelensky, it's not because it's just
And
trash.
It's true. That is true.
Well, fucking Danny Boy here
Yeah,
is a
and
big
so
fan of it too.
currently,
So
we are witnessing
fucking Colonel
this
Danny.
very targeted personal
Hold on,
information
inside, suck my
campaign
cock.
when
Fucking
politicians and
cunt.
the government-sponsored media who are being
Sorry,
paid
if you're
from
on
the
there,
government
you
budget, and
just
specifically
just
with the
kinda
U.S.
like
taxpayers'
suggest
money,
I shouldn't talk shit.
there is this libeling against Donald Trump. I won't even quote the kind of words that they're saying. They're calling him evil.
You won't quote
and
him?
Much more
Why?
blasphemous words.
Why?
The Vice President
God,
Vance is
you're an
also
award-winning journalist. You won't
being
quote?
called all kind of derogatory names. So it's
No, you're
unthinkable.
too good for
It's hard
that.
to explain. So it is
Take that high
very,
road. When
very
they go low,
strange that
you go high.
you don't hear any judgments officially given to such an information campaign. And so the question is why, until now, no financial audit took place over the money that the United States supplied Ukraine. Everybody knows that the government is benefiting
Yeah,
from
financial audits usually don't
enormously,
happen mid-war,
and
but
well, clearly,
whatever.
The government and
Same thing with the election.
understand that if they lose
Like, there's
power,
no
then they won't
election.
be able to
He's
get
just
any more
trying to
money, so
become a
that's why
dictator.
they want this war to
Literally
go
being
on.
invaded, half the country is gone.
And in terms of how all this
so
is
many people
affecting
are
Russians,
dead.
because the Russians
It's
see
just a
all that
fucking
stuff. They see
disaster.
what's happening
But
on the
we
front
need
line,
to hold
and it's
elections.
giving them more
So
encouragement,
stupid.
especially as they see more aid
So
being
fucking
diverted
dumb.
into Israel.
Pro-Russian trash.
The headline in Moskovsky Komsomolets, Kiev forgotten. Putin telephoned Trump and wished him happy birthday.
Yep.
It seems this call has frightened Ukraine and Europe more than the Iran-Israel conflict. What's more, we were happy to hear the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, congratulating Russians on Russia Day. US anti-drone systems are being taken away from Ukraine and moved to the Middle East, and generally weapon supplies to Ukraine are being reduced. Trump has stopped talking about settling the Russia-Ukraine conflict. As cynical as this may sound, on a tactical level, there are pluses for us from the conflict between Iran and Israel. It should be noted that even before this, Trump stopped talking about Russia and Ukraine. He seems to have tired of being a go-between. And now comes this very friendly telephone call from Putin. Happy birthday, Donald. The situation's pretty clear. Kiev has been forgotten.
So that has to be a very painful thing for the people of Ukraine to see that.
Yeah, it's painful for the people, not for you two. You guys are fucking on board. You guys are fucking comrades. So you guys are good, but that's tough for the Ukrainian people to hear because it's horseshit. I'm embarrassed that my country fucking is handling itself the way it is, by the way, in case you couldn't tell by the fucking tone of my voice. But yeah, super embarrassed, super cringe that this Russian propaganda is fucking going so hard. But hey, let's keep eating the slop.
Trump is now, he said that he was ready to walk away.
Eat
He wanted
that
to deal,
slop.
but now he
Eat
seems
it
to be
up.
having better relations with Moscow.
Get him, Danny.
Meanwhile, his
Get him,
weapons are
Colonel
going
Danny.
over into Israel, etc.
Shovel the slop.
for Ukraine, and then Gary, if you can put up that one about the other one. I'm sorry. That'll be second. The U.S. has announced that military aid packages for Ukraine. There hadn't been any new ones in almost 5 months, and the number of weapons to the stockpiles is dwindling in Ukrainian warehouses, and the aid for next year is going to be cut, and that's going to be starting in September of this year. That's our fiscal year. So everything is showing that the amount of support for Ukraine is going down, and all of the support up to this point hasn't worked. So the question is, how much longer can Ukraine keep fighting if they're losing resources?
Not much longer. Hopefully Europeans fucking keep stepping up and
Well,
help them
Colonel
out.
Davis,
But
this is the kind of question that I would definitely be willing to
apparently
direct to you,
America can't,
because back in 2022, what it was all about when we were told that we will support you as long as it would take. If you could imagine the kind of information campaign that was taking place back then in Ukraine, i.e., when Putin withdrew from Kiev, everybody was crying out loud, "We won! We beat Russia!" Because in the beginning, what we heard that we won't be able to fight for no longer than 3 days.
This is literally like a couple
moved
days
his,
after
military
the
into
drone
into
strikes.
the country. So when the Istanbul
When were the drone strikes?
agreement took place and Putin withdrew his
drone
forces from Kiev, Zelensky took the opportunity and started saying, "You see, I have already won, and that means that we can beat Russia." And so everybody in Ukraine was thinking that it's just one little step more, and we will be able to be victorious. And everybody was saying, after
2
that,
weeks ago.
a
So
revolution
yeah, this
should
came
have
out
taken
right
place in
after.
Russia, and
Big
that would have
fucking
devastated Russia
surprise.
completely. And that was the kind
This
of scenario
sexy piece
when,
of fucking
our Western partners,
Russian
proposed to us,
fucking
specifically Blinken and
propaganda
Biden, so the
showing itself
Ukrainians
up on my
were,
door, hiking up its skirt.
persuaded in it so
Right
quickly
after they
from
embarrassed
every,
themselves by letting all their
loudspeaker
fucking
one would
tactical
hear that
bombers
Russia
get
is
fucked.
weak, Russia is
Yeah.
going to break up.
Yeah, this makes
As long
sense.
as you just exert a little bit more pressure on it. And so, as you can see, we're still devastating Russia, and nothing happens. Only our lives are disappearing. And so it was good to the people who, I won't be afraid to say, abuse Ukraine. You see, and sorry, nobody is currently, people are saying politically right now in the West that nobody promised that Ukraine is going to be included into NATO. When Zelensky all these years was saying that, tomorrow we are in NATO. Tomorrow we're in NATO. NATO has enough power to annihilate Russia. But you see, 3 years of military action already taking place, and what is going on? People are dying. The population in Ukraine is going down. Ukrainian territory is shrinking.
You know what other population's going down, lady? The guys sending you all those nice checks, fucking keep you looking good. Fucking Russia, they're losing people quite a bit too. They're losing so many people they can't even afford to help Iran. Iran's like, please, we sell you oil, help us. And Russia's like, no. Russia's like fucking the Watchmen, no. So get fucked with this fucking population shit. Russia's been generationally decimated. It's like the 80s all over again.
Thinking it all is very cynical, so it is extremely difficult for
And you know who doesn't care?
mentally
Your
adequate
boss.
person to accept, because it is very painful
He don't have to
to
fight.
see
He's just
that,
a fucking thug.
when for 30 years we've
I
been
wanna
told that
fight
we're going to be supported
Putin.
by the most powerful nation in
I
the
think
world.
he'd probably
This
beat my
most
ass,
powerful
but I
nation
would
in the
love to
world is
fist fight
turning its
Putin.
back to us right now, and it is talking in a friendly way with the country which
I don't know,
attacked
how
us.
big
And
is
so the
Putin? Is
Ukrainians
he a
don't
big
understand
guy?
where they should run, who they should be
I
afraid of,
know
what they are to do,
size
because
doesn't
we are
matter, and
seeing
he's
today
KGB,
is
so
not
he's probably
just
fucking
missiles
super
and
fucking
drones,
lethal. But
which on a daily basis
I'm
are flying
6'2",
over
so I
Ukraine.
wonder if I
But
have
this
any help
terrible
with my
information
size.
campaign,
I
and
probably
I've
suck on
just touched upon one aspect of it, because apart from it all, Ukrainians
But I
are
would love
being
to punch Putin in
sickened
the face. Just get one good shot
upon
before
each
he
other,
murders
because
me.
the government is continuously thinking about how they should turn Ukrainians against each other, so that the Ukrainians wouldn't raise questions about where all the money is going.
Oh!
They cannot speak Russian.
Oh, who's turning Ukrainians against each other, lady? The disgraced Ukrainian journalist who's taking Russian money to fucking shit on her own country, or fucking the war?
You cannot go into the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. You are forbidden to criticize Zelensky. Only those at the front line can be considered as true Ukrainians. But the military who speak Russian, they are being persecuted. So Ukraine transformed itself into the territory of hate, not because people are haters, but simply because the government is putting the country through this horrible experiment. So,
Did she just call the fucking war in Ukraine an experiment? Did she just call the invasion of a country by another country a fucking experiment? Is that really what she fucking said? This is fucking crazy. These commenters have to be bots, because if you're a human being and you don't see that this is fucking Russian propaganda, that's crazy.
I'm just thinking, and that the country should roll down to some sort of point when everybody would kind of wake up and demand that a stop should be put in, because it's not just the war or death taking place in Ukraine. It's like psychosis that is being forcefully subjected. So what do you think, Colonel, when this whole thing might end? What do you think?
Well, that's exactly
Colonel
the
David's got a
concern.
little check from Russia.
And
Probably
when
not.
you
He's
see,
America. He
Derek, you
can't
put that
afford to
last full
catch
screen out there.
charges.
Russia's getting ready,
He's
or
just
actually probably
fucking
already has started in its
dumb
summer
fuck,
offensive.
useful idiot.
Already in May, they took more territory than in any months, almost any month since 2022, and they are now accelerating their advance. That's on top of now then Trump diverting ammunition to Israel, sending less ammunition in the next year. So it's going to be less and less and less. And then, like even one of our viewers asked here, they said, look, if the Ukraine army could eventually collapse, because the question is, how much longer can they fight if they don't have even ammunition, much less the people? Because at some point, just physics being what it is, the Ukraine army is going to collapse.
I like how
And
right
then what's
after
gonna
a
happen to
huge
Ukraine?
success by the Ukrainians and crippling a Russian bomber fleet, this garbage comes out. That's so fucking funny.
I believe that this, regrettably, is a rhetorical question, because every day I'm asking myself how one could help simple people. Every day I receive hundreds of messages from people who are asking to help them to save either their husband or their son from being
just wanna
mobilized. People are sending
bless your
terrible
heart.
message telling, my husband went into the grocery store
Oh,
and didn't
Lord.
make it back, or he's having
Did he
leukemia
not make
and
it back
won't
because
be
he
got
got conscripted or because he got blown up? You haven't talked about any of the people that have died of Russian bombs. I wonder why we keep leaving that out. And then I hear stories from people who are telling that their husbands were arrested by the Secret Service because they wrote something in the social network. It sounds like the Russian propaganda story, but the fact of the matter that you don't have to think up of anything, just simply show what is happening in Ukraine. And that is worse than any propaganda. So the worst thing is not just the foreign aid coming to a stop. It may not be, the shortage of missiles or ammunition. The worst thing is what is going on in Ukrainians' minds, because It is
you
probably
don't have any
terrible.
future. You won't be able to leave the country if you want, because you're going to be either shot or
not
arrested. And so on the one hand, you are afraid of your government. On the other hand, you're afraid of the Russian missiles. On the third, you are afraid of the conscription officers and being press ganged. That's the life of a simple Ukrainian. So the only thing left for us to do is to pray. But
That's
unfortunately,
what
I
Russia
see
wants you to
very
believe the
little
life of
information
a simple
about
Ukrainian
what's
is.
truly going
How
on
much longer do we have
in
left
the
of this?
country.
This is pain.
Hundreds of
We're gonna go
cathedrals
to
were seized.
1.5 speed.
Priests are being bitten. Just 50 priests, according to information that I was able to find out, are in prison. I received a terrible letter recently from a family of Ukrainian priests who, despite his beliefs, was conscripted, taken to the front. He's being bullied. He's being roped to a tree trunk. It's difficult to believe anything like that, but if you ever have a chance to get into Ukraine, you will see. I can remind you of the case of Gonzalo Lira, who died in the Ukrainian prison. And it's strange that no American media is discussing his case.
It really is, and it's just unfortunate that the only narrative the West seems to be able to talk about is whatever Volodymyr Zelensky says, whatever Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, Ursula von der Leyen. That seems to be the exclusive domain.
So what
that
I'm
most people
seeing
ever hear
from
about.
a
And you just don't-
cursory Google search. Now listen, I understand that a quick Google search isn't like high end. I know what good research looks like. I would never like do a video like this without doing significantly better research as far like not what I'm doing, but what they're doing. But just a cursory Google search shows nothing of 50 priests. It's just a plain lie. Once again, hold on. 50 per, yeah, okay. So I'm getting a lot of Russians. Fuck them. Honestly, if you are watching this video, thank you. I'm glad that you're watching it. Give it a like, give us a sub. But if I got anything wrong, put it in the chat. I would love to hear it because I'm looking at the chat of the video. I'm looking at Google. And I'm looking at the fucking ick test, and holy shit, this is just obvious
We hear
propaganda.
about stuff
So
like you, which